All right, students, week 6, lesson 6, we want to talk about a few chapters. We're going to look at the chapter 9, the female serial murderers. We're going to talk about male serial murders, and we're going to talk about healthcare murderers. And we're going to combine and look and differentiate some of the different characteristics of the three. Some of the things are going to cross over, of course, and we're going to see some similarities and differences. So let's check it out. When we look at the different things in the female serial murders, we want to look at the emergence, the societal scope, and the impact of the female serial murders have had. We're going to look at the different cases. We're going to explore the psychopathic tendencies of the serial murders that are female, and we're going to look at some of the latest data. When you look at the data, 8% of those serial killers out there from 2004 to 2014 were female. So they don't cause a lot of the serial murdering that's going on within that category. Of the percentage of offenders, there's 57% of teen serial murders are female. So they pair up at a higher number than individual. Most of the race of female serial murders are Caucasian at 95%, and then the other 5% is African American. It's kind of interesting that they actually give us a 100% category, because I'm wondering, with the demographics from the federal government looking at the census, Hispanics have always been up through 2010 calculated into the white category. So I'm kind of curious. You can also look at that and say, what about the Asians? What about the Pacific Islanders and others? So here they give us 100%, so that's kind of interesting. It talks about the birth range. It talks about the from 31 to 91. So there's a huge range of different ages of female serial murderers. Average age of offender at first killing, 39 years. It talks about apprehension is around 44 years old. Average span of offender killing, 6 years. Total number of victims, about 65 to 81 is where they have that range there. It looks like that they say that offenders who killed all their victims in the same year is about 29%. So you would say there's a large portion of them that kill within the first year, but the other 71% spans out longer than a year. It's over a longer period of time. And that goes with characteristics of killing in general, especially of serial killers, where they have a, what do you call that? Those psychological stages of these events, where there's a heightened stage, then they have a cooling off period, and then they have that urge again, and then they go back to, working their way up to killing someone again. The method of killing, you got poison, strangling, or smother is 19%. Shooting them only is 25%, pretty high up there. Stab only, 5%. Blunt force is 5%. The combination of poisoning, beating, and strangling and stabbing and or shooting is 27%. So if you look at it, you break down the data, they actually do a combination more than an individual act. Of course, the gun, shooting them is right there in second. So, is that because they're more violent when they do serial killing? That's something we could look at. Is it because possibly that their victims are bigger, stronger, or more like a male versus female? That's something we can look at. Strangers only calculate for 43%. Prostitutes, 5%. Elderly, 10%. Patients, 10%. Of course, males only, 38%. Females only, 14%. Male and female victims, 48%. Involving more than one state, only 24%. So you can see where they don't travel to multiple states as much. You also see where they do have male and female victims. Is a very high rate. Strangers, that's a pretty high rate right there. They rarely kill prostitutes. Where when you look at the male, we'll have to, what do you call that, correlate that and see what happens there. Let's see what else we got here. When we look at female serial killers, especially when they act alone, are almost invisible to public view and can kill over many years without detection. So that's something that where, because they're only 8% of the serial killing population, then they're not looked at like males are in that realm of murdering. It talks about when Eileen was linked to killing 7 men with a gun, she was quickly labeled the nation's first female serial killer. This was incorrect. She was not the first female serial killer in the United States. There were several before her. Why did this lady, become where they say that she was the first? All right. It's because you have the modern media. You have the modern social media, that grew not too long after that. You have different things that spawned that where we were able to, the world was smaller. The America was smaller and the news traveled fast, at a greater speed. Okay. Many female serial killers continue their murders for several years before being apprehended. Very few of these women were found to have criminal histories or a criminal career. Unlike the dramatic rise of black male serial killers over the past 15 years, black women seldom engage in serial murders. Regardless of social class, as of 2011, over 95% of all female serial killers were white. We're also going to see that with males. We're going to see some of these characteristics pop out to where there's going to be differences in the race, gender, ethnicity. You're going to have economic status will play a role sometimes. Female serial offenders murder more family members than strangers. But since 75, there has been an increase in killing strangers. Ask yourself, why is that? Is it because there's a detachment because they don't know these people? So it's kind of like, there's less connection to these people because you don't have a clue who they are. In the case of female serial killers who act alone, patients in hospitals, nursing homes, and other care facilities are the preferred victims. Again, these are people that, they care for and stuff like that. And maybe it's a compassion thing. And we'll look into that further later on down the road. When family members were victims, husbands overwhelmingly became the primary target. Indeed, some female serial killers have given new meaning to the term serial monogamy. And that's kind of interesting. It talks about the Nanny Doss or the giggling grandma profile. That's something that you could scope out here a little bit later on. Most female offenders who had an accomplice used the violent means to kill the majority of their victims. Very interesting. It's one of those things that makes you wonder, because they had help, they were able to be more violent and act out instead of secretly killing them. Okay, female offenders almost exclusively killed victims who were categorized as low facilitation homicides. That's something right there that we could try to look up and see what that means to kind of give some of y'all, because I've had questions on this one. Let me look it up and see what it says right here. Let's see if I can drag it over for you. Whoops, before I mess something up. Let's see. Easing. Okay. What else can we see here? Let me see. Simplification, easing of the nerve transmission. So they're talking about as a low, easily, homicide, something that you could do without a lot of hard work. When in this study, women in this study, with a few exceptions, generally were not sexually involved with their victims, as more commonly seen with their male counterparts. Okay. Mobility. Place-specific killers, common among female offenders, repeatedly murdered their victims in the same location. Some of the common locations were nursing homes, hospitals, and private homes. So you can see, because it's mostly one state where most of the murders were done, you can see where they, killed their victims in these couple of locations. 1/3 of all female serial murders were identified as place specific. Again, it goes back to this one spot where most of these murders happen. Females identified as place specific were responsible for nearly half of all murders committed by female offenders. You know, it's one of those things that where you're going to see where a lot of family members are going to fall into these categories, especially children and things like that. Female offenders, when we talk about people who like the poison, were most likely to use poisons at least some of the time to kill their victims. Very, far back in history, this is one of the things that was really popular back in the day, was poisoning people, because it was hard to detect until they started coming up ways with researching it and uncovering it. Some of these poisons administered to induce death quickly or gradually were large doses of potassium chloride, which attacks the heart, and you can talk about arsenic. Arsenic was one of the big ones when I was reading some of the early on history of killing several years ago when I was doing some of my research in the PhD program. Also, when I used to investigate some of the murdering and the homicides and things like that and build up some of the characteristics of those different types of murder, arsenic was found, and it says right here, right below this, was popular for hundreds of years as a method of murder because it was hard to detect. When you were being poisoned, you really didn't realize it until it was too late. In the 1800s, arsenic could be purchased at any chemist's shop and was commonly used in small quantities by women to improve their facial complexions. And so, then they found out, don't eat it, don't digest it. Biographical data on female serial murders indicate several instances of broken homes, displaced children, and other emotionally traumatic experiences. Female multiple murderers generally did not appear to have experienced more trauma as children than other criminals, or perhaps even non-criminals. So the data is not clear, but we do know that it plays a role. Understanding female violence, in their study, they talked about examine instrumental violence, psychopathy, and offense characteristics. They found that in order to better treat young females, we need a more tailored approach based upon the types of crimes they commit and their personality traits. This is very interesting. I was talking to a therapist on Sunday that we were discussing this with people with mental illness, and when they are having an episode of an outburst of some sort, and how to, depending on what type of characteristics or what type of personality they have or mental illness, we need to approach them at different angles in order to de-escalate the situation and try to care for that person. Same thing with this. If you're sitting there dealing with depending on the person and the personality and the type of characteristics they have, you're not one size fit all type of treatment is not going to work. And that's something that's really unique, and that we're finding more and more out about there. Relationship difficulties. You see dishonesty and frequent acts of theft. We see frequent sexual conduct as adolescents. They're going to have superficial interest in others. They're going to have an impaired grasp on reality. They're going to damage their sense of self, their self-esteem. They're also going to be more suicidal and have self-harm behaviors. We see this with girls and young ladies that cut, where they would cut themselves and mutilate themselves and to try to feel and try to make themselves have different emotions and feelings. We see this to where when there's a broken home or there's abuse, how that affects what they do in the future. And so we could see some of that when it comes about. We also see that this lack of insight in understanding the motives of others, feeling of distress and anxiety during moments of self-admiration, frustration over unattained goals, desires, and needs. We could see this that where they're going to have behavioral problems. They're going to have ways where they're having difficulty in coping or difficulty in actually being themselves. And this is Psychology 101. And it's really interesting when you're able to characterize and observe some of the classical cases of the different people, talking, not just serial murders, but overall, it's neat to kind of be able to categorize and then be able to help those people based on once you're able to size them up. Says persistent need for attention and admiration from others. This is where you hear the phrases of, oh, so and so's got daddy issues or mommy issues, or they're always looking for a guy or a lady that's like their parent, and stuff like that. Sadness expressed, rather than actual depression. And we could see that as well, where they're going to be, again, this is all behavioral 101, psychology 101, to where there's going to be one of the things that my psychologist friend and I talk about all the time is recognizing the signs and symptoms of someone who's depressed, who looks sad all the time, who's acting out, needing attention. These different things of anxiety, distress, all these things that was said right here. We can, if we are aware of our situational surroundings, and when we're working these jobs and we see someone like this, we're able to help them better if we pick up these signs and symptoms early on. And we'll get into that later. Hysteria instead of narcissism. Okay, symptoms of depression or guilt. Presence of overlapping personality disorders. Now, one of the things that we've talked about before was this personality disorder where there's multiple personalities. If someone is really into that. For a span of 10 years, it says that on this person right here, Megan Hutzman of Pleasant Grove, Utah, by her own admission, strangled and suffocated 6 of her own babies immediately upon their births. And then it talks about, the lady from France, over a 17-year period, smothered 8 of her newborns and buried them in her plastic bags in her garden. She said that after 2 children that she did not want more and did not believe in using contraceptives. So, wow. Stressors. Several cases in the present study revealed histories of child abuse, including sexual assault, prostitution, and neglect, extreme poverty, and unstable marital relationships. See, there you go. We're going to see these things. It doesn't mean that all serial killers, have these or victims of these things, but we see a high rate of these things in serial murderers and in female serial murders as well. A critical factor may be that their inability as children or as adults, whether it's genetically or environmentally based, to deal constructively with their own sense of victimization. It's one of those things that where people act out in different ways. People change their behaviors. People rebel. People become murderers or doing graffiti, like the negative kind where you're not getting in trouble for it. Or they start acting out, doing drugs, alcoholism, those things like that when they're not able to handle the situations when they're young or growing up, or they have lack of parenting. Public response, that's very interesting. We see that the public's perception of violence may play an important role in the treatment of female offenders. Compared with male offenders, female serial killers in the study appear to have been treated by the media and the criminal justice system different. They are kind of given not as harsh of a lens depending on who the person is. Still, women offenders are far more likely to have been confined to mental institutions than men for their multiple homicides. Where women, they'd automatically think that they're mentally, unstable. Where men, they're just mean murderers and bad guys. So there's a treatment that's a biased treatment there, gender treatment there. Monster. I don't like that movie. It creeps me out. True story of the serial killer we talked about a while ago. You have some other ones here. Deadly Medicine of this Miss Jones who administered lethal injections. Bonnie and Clyde. Really? I never thought about that. Based on a true story of a bank robbers who killed several people. Who was the most sadistic of the 2 offenders? Oh, who was? Didn't read that right. But it's interesting because a lot of movies and some of the articles I've read about Bonnie and Clyde actually act like Bonnie was the evil the more evil of the two. And so that's something I never put those into the aspect of serial murder. See, I learned something. So on that note, I was going to see if y'all would watch this for me right here real quick. It's about a 7-minute video, and see if we can scope this out.
I'm just wondering how you're going to be, at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Prepared.
I'm prepared. I'm all right. I'm all right with it.
Now watch how she changes her behavior as she moves along.
I'm all right with it, but like I said, remember, let them know that I know that the cops knew who I was after Richard Mallory died. I left prints everywhere, and they covered it up. And let me kill the rest of those guys to turn me into a serial killer. I know they did, because I was no professional serial killer or anything, murderer, or whatever you want to call it. I wasn't professional at what I was doing.
Eileen,
I did some sloppy work, and I left.
How have you prepared yourself for tomorrow morning?
I'm all right with it. Yeah, I'm ready to go. Hey, I was tortured at BCI. They had the intercom on in the room, and they kept lying that it wasn't on, and they were using sonic pressure on my head since 1997.
Sonic
And every
pressure.
time I was trying to write something, I think they had some kind of eye in the cell, I'm not sure, but every time I started writing something, it went up higher. So I'm thinking that probably had the TV rigged. The TV or the mirror, something was rigged. They got a huge satellite on the compound. After they put the huge satellite on the compound, it could have been either rigged to the TV set or the mirror or something, because the electrician, when he put the mirror on the wall, he said, doesn't that look like a computer? The back of it, and he stuck it to the wall.
And do you think, did that affect your mind, do you think?
Huh?
Did that affect your mind in some way, the sonic?
It was crushing my head, and they were using sonic pressure continually. Then when I had 3 meetings with Miss Villacorta on it, every meeting I had, she increased the pressure of the volume of the comm, increased the harassment on the floor, increased the trays being inedible, just increased every bit of my complaints and trashed all grievances. They're trying to make it look like I was crazy at all times, rig up the room with torture. If I said anything about I think their whole plan was trying to make it look like I was totally crazy, and so nobody would believe anything I have to say about anything, and then drive me there if they could. I suffered so bad. I was really struggling to survive. Had a lot of trays that were attempted murder and everything. I had to wash all my food off. And then one day I didn't wash my food off, and I was sick for 3 weeks, almost died.
But you're okay now.
I'm okay. I'm okay. God is going to be there. Jesus Christ is going to be there. All the angels and everything. And, whatever's on the beyond. I think it's going to be more like Star Trek, beaming me up into a space vehicle, man. Then I move on, recolonize to another planet or whatever. But it's whatever's the beyond. I know it's going to be good, because I didn't do anything as wrong as they said. I did the right thing. And I saved a lot of people's butts from getting hurt and raped and killed, too.
So are you saying that you killed in self-defense or in cold blood? What do you, because you changed your story. I'm just trying to
What are you talking about? Change story on what?
No, about whether it was self-defense or not.
I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to get into depth about my cases, Nick. I'm on my way to the chamber. Nothing stopping it. You can believe it or you don't have to believe it. That's up to you, man. Put a big question mark on your film.
What more is there to say about the cops? What more do you want to say about the cops?
A lot of stuff. Did you know that they were surveilling me before I killed? And then I knew it? And that it was covered up? Did you know there was helicopters dropping down from the sky, deputy sheriff, with decoys picking me up 4 or 5 months before my arrest? It was covered up?
But nonetheless,
Nobody ever asked me these
whether the
questions.
cops were following you or not, Eileen.
Oh, whether the cops were following me or
Okay,
not, Eileen, what?
Let's say the cops were following you.
Yeah.
Let's say they were following you
Uh-huh.
and they did everything that you're saying they did.
Uh-huh.
Nonetheless,
Yeah.
you killed 7 men.
Yes, you
And I'm
did.
asking you, what got you to kill the
And
second
I'm
man?
telling you because the cops let me keep killing them, Nick. Don't
Yeah,
you
but
get it?
Not everybody is killing 7 people. So there must have been something in you that was getting you to
Oh,
do
you
that.
are lost, Nick.
So
I was a
explain.
hitchhiking hooker.
Right.
Running into trouble. I shoot the guy if I ran into trouble. Physical trouble. The cops knew it. When the physical trouble came along, let her clean the streets, and then we'll pull her in.
But how
That's
come there
why.
was so much physical trouble? Because it was all in 1 year. 7 people in 1
Oh
year.
well. Oh well.
But why not say no?
Because I'm out of retaliation for taking my life like this and getting rich off it all these years in total pathological lying. Yeah, thanks a lot. I lost my fucking life because of it. Couldn't even get a fair trial. Couldn't even get a fair investigation or nothing. Couldn't even have my appeals right. You sabotaged my ass, society, and the cops, and the system. A raped woman got executed. It was used for books and movies and shit. Ladder climbs, re-election, everything else. I got a big finger in all your faces. Thanks a lot. You're an inhumane bunch of fucking living bastards and bitches, and you're gonna get your asses nuked in the end. And pretty soon it's coming. 2019, a rock's supposed to hit you anyhow. You're all gonna get nuked. You don't take fucking human life like this and just sabotage and rip it apart like Jesus on the cross and say thanks a lot for all the fucking money I made off of you. And not care about a human being and the truth being told. Now I know what Jesus was going through. They've been trying to tell the truth, and I keep getting it stepped on. Concerned about if I was raped, I'm not giving you book and movie info. I'm giving you info for investigations and stuff, and that's it. We're going to have to cut this interview, Nick. I'm not going to go into any more detail. I'm leaving. I'm glad. Thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass. Okay, let's go.
It was really pretty incredible that Eileen had just sailed through the psychiatric test the day before. It makes you wonder what you'd have to do to fail.
Very interesting. And that's the show Monsters about. If you want to know more, y'all can look it up on YouTube, wherever you want to go to on that. Very, very interesting. I watched the facial features, of course, because that's all we had to look at. I was watching her eyes and the way that they dilated. You watch the different tones of her voice, things that she said, why she said she did it. So, yeah. All right. So, that is our female murderers on that chapter right there of serial murders that were female. Y'all can scope out the chapter. It's going to be, and I will post all this, is already on lesson 6. And we will have 2 more videos looking at the other chapters as we move along. Thank you.